Hello guys, let's talk about Lab 8 today. In the lecture part, we have learned add button, first record, last record. We will learn delete button, modify button, previous record, next record, and find ID. So let's try to run this code first. Okay, if I click first record, it displays my first employee information. And last record display my last employee information. If I click previous record, it displays the 15, 49, 48. And next button, it displays the next employee. Okay, now I'm in my first employee. If I still click previous record, I will go back to the last record, which is display my last employee ID. Currently, I'm in the last employee. If I click next button, I will go back to my first employee information. If I use find ID, let's try to find ID 14. It shows the 14 employee. If I try to find the 88, okay, there's no result, so it notified me, cannot find the ID. Okay, let me add one more employee, which is 52. Save. So now the first record, the last record is my new employee. If I modify it, save, so I modify it. The first record is that. The last record is my new employee, and I have modified the information. If I click delete button, okay, it deletes my current employee. There's nothing. Okay, that's all for the program. Now let's talk about the code logic. First, declare a target index to describe your current position. So the target index means the current index you display. For example, if you display the employee 41, your target index should be 40. If you display the employee 35, your target index should be 34. So this variable will be applied for following buttons, which is very important. Before introducing find ID private sub, we need to build another private sub, xfind, to find my current ID. So inside of this private sub, first reset target as -1, and then build a for loop to find it. So inside of the for loop, you need to compare all your xid with the current x target. The x target is the current ID you need to find. If the xid is equal to x target, which means we found the ID. So set up the target as your current target, so which is your current index, and exit the current sub manually. If you cannot find the ID after running the whole loop, do nothing. The target is still -1. Okay. Next one is the find ID button. First, use the input box to get your ID you need to find, and then call the sub xfind with your current ID. So we have declared the xfind before. After you run the xfind, you will get two kinds of results. If the target is -1, which means you cannot find the ID, so use the message box to notify the user, cannot find. Otherwise, if the target is a value, is a number. For example, 31, 41, 50, which means you find the ID. So you call the xDisplay subroutine to display your results. Next one, previous and next button are very similar. So I introduce them together. First, you need to use current ID in the text box and call the expand to get your current index. The current ID in the text box is your text box 1. And then use if structure to update your index. For example, if my current index is 5, which means the previous one is 4, the next one is 6. But there's a special condition. For the previous one, if my current index is my first index, which means I display the first employee, if I still click the previous button, I will go back to the last index. So you need to manually change the target into the last index. Otherwise, just simply use target is equal to target minus 1 to update your target index. For the next index, if I display my last employee, so the target is my last index, I will go back to my first index. So you need to manually change the target index into first index. Otherwise, just simply add the target index by 1. After you update your target, use XDisplay to display your results. Next one, delete button. So the delete button is very simple. First, use current ID in the text box and call the expand to get your current index, which is your target. Use xsave to write all your data. So let's go back to xsave. If the k is not equal to xread, we write the data, which means if the target is 5, we won't write the data with the index 5, which means we delete that data. That's the logic. After you finish save the data, we will load the form again to update your current database in the program. So just use call form1 load sender, (e). Next one, modify button. It's the same step as the delete button. So you need to use current ID in the text box and call expand to get your current index. And then follow the add button. The modify is very similar as add button. The difference is, let's go back to the add button. The difference is, do not use redeem to change the size of your array, because we only modify the data, so we won't change the size of the array. So you don't need to type redeem preserve. And then do not modify anything in all text box automatically. So when we add new data, we will update text box 1 the text with new ID, and then clear other text box. But for here, you don't need to do that because we modify the data. Next one, update your current data from the input of the user, so which is here. And for the add button, the index is the new last index. But for modify button, we just use the current index because we need to modify the employee information based on the current index. After finish everything, use xsave to save the data, and then load the form again to update your data in the program. That's all for the lab